Welcome to NOAA Live. My name is Nicole Bartlett, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. This series is sponsored by NOAA's Regional Collaboration Network, where I work, which is spread across the country and helps connect people to all that NOAA does. It's also sponsored by Woods Hole Sea Grant, which is located at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution here on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. This series is designed to help you get to know NOAA and some of our incredible experts. All of our speakers work for some part of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Today, we're going to introduce you to a handful of folks: Lieutenant Dustin Picard, Lieutenant Doug Polishin, who work out of Silver Spring, Maryland, Ensign Caroline John in Seattle, if we can get her on here, and Ensign Cara Geiger in Norfolk, Virginia, all from NOAA's Office of Marine and Aviation Operations. While we'll be talking to you about a career in the NOAA Corps, we want to recognize that we are all coming to you from the traditional lands of Native communities who have substantial traditional and local knowledge and much to share with us. We acknowledge that Doug and Dustin are joining us today from the traditional lands of the Piscataway Nation. That Cara is coming to us from the traditional territories of the Powhatan Confederacy, the Chesapeake, and Nansemond peoples. And finally, that Caroline will be joining us from the land of the coastal Salish peoples, including the Duwamish, past and present. We are hosting this webinar from the ancestral lands of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead-Equina. I finally want to extend a special thanks to our American Sign Language interpreters, Crystal Butler and Jessica Yoakum. A few guidelines before I hand you over to our speakers. You're all muted because we have a lot of people on the line and we want to make sure that you can hear our speakers. There's a box where you can write questions. Please let us know if you're a class tuning in and who's asking the questions so we can give you a shout out. We encourage you to ask them as we go, and I will be keeping track for our speakers. They'll stop every now and then and answer a few. We may not get to all of your questions, but we're going to try to answer as many as we can. All right, Dustin, I'm turning them over to you.
All righty, thank you, Nicole, and welcome everybody. Happy Wednesday, good afternoon, good morning. I know we got some folks calling in from internationally as well, so really cool to be here and be a part of this webinar today. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Lieutenant Dustin Picard, and I'm with the NOAA Commissioned Corps. As you can see on the slide, I've got a few photos, one recent, two from a little bit back in the day. And you might be wondering, how did this young baby here on this first photo become a NOAA Corps officer? Well, both my parents are military officers, so I was a military brat growing up. My dad was Navy, my mom was Air Force, and we always lived by the ocean. And that instilled in me a love for everything maritime from an early age, and it kind of guided me throughout my career, or my academic career. When I went to the University of Maryland to get a traditional four-year degree, I majored in marine science and found out about the NOAA Corps during my time in school. I quickly applied and was accepted, and that was back in 2013, so about 8 years ago now. Coming out of my undergrad, I served as a junior officer on the NOAA ship Ron Brown, which is a really cool experience. I got to travel to about 8 or 9 different countries over the course of 2 years, working a lot in international environmental science. I then worked at Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary, which is equivalent to like an underwater national park. NOAA operates a few of these, and you'll see a little clip from that here shortly. I then went to work on a research vessel, again as an operations officer, where I was the facilitator between the science party and the ship itself. It was a really cool, challenging, and rewarding assignment where I got to work with some of the best scientists in the world to execute their missions offshore. And then I recently transitioned to the NOAA Corps recruiting branch here in Silver Spring, Maryland, and excited to start this part of my chapter. So, as I mentioned, I got a little clip from my time at Flower Garden Banks, and we'll go ahead and roll that now, please.
So you kind of just see some of the highlights of some of my experience sailing on NOAA vessels. This is the American flag flown off the Ronald H. Brown. It was about a 28-day cruise, and we were doing some buoy deployments along the way in the equatorial Pacific.
I've been in the Corps for about 5 years now. It's one of 7 services. Of course, you have your 5 armed services, then you have 2 uniformed services, one being the NOAA Commissioned Corps. And we support NOAA's research missions from American Samoa all the way up to Maine. I think NOAA Corps officers bring a diverse background, so I can slide in at any of the crew positions. So if a crew member needs to cruise off or something comes up, I can help facilitate that role. or I can slide in as a research diver, working diver, scientific diver, even a dive master. That's some of the best part of my job, really. I say go out and do it. I think a lot of people have reservations because they look at it and they say it's such a big commitment, and yes it is, but I think you'll be surprised about the training and what you learn from yourself that you can actually go out and accomplish. I like to do a full career in the NOAA Corps, so that's my goal right now. But after, I'd like to stay working for NOAA. I've definitely enjoyed it. I've always wanted to work for NOAA since I've always been interested in environmental and marine science. I've been here down at Flower Garden Banks, which is based in Galveston, Texas, for about 2.5 years now. Out here 100 miles offshore, not many people get to experience this. These coral reefs are very healthy, over 50% coral coverage in some areas. So it's unlike any place I've ever dove. I feel very lucky every time I get to go in the water and see that. It takes your breath away, really.
All righty, well, thank you for playing that video. You can find the full clip on YouTube if you're interested in watching it all. But now I'd like to transition, just talk broadly about the NOAA Corps and kind of introduce it to you all. So I have a question for the audience. How many officers do you think are in the NOAA Commissioned Officer Corps?
All right, so before we get your answer, we should explain that every member of the NOAA Commissioned Officer Corps is an officer, right?
Mm-hmm. That is correct. Thank you
Okay,
for making that note.
So we're basically asking, it's just so we don't trick you, how many members do you think are there in the NOAA Commissioned Officer Corps? Okay, so Theodore guesses first. He says 500. James says 1,000. Leslie says 120. James says 250. Any other guess? Okay, Alice and Paul say 550. Michelle is going up to 600, and Texas thinks there are 5,000.
Okay, there's a pretty wide range of responses there, but a lot closer than I'd actually anticipated. So our exact number is 321 officers. So I don't know who was closest, depends if we're doing Prices Right rules, but there was definitely some answers around the 200 to the 400 range that was pretty close. So as I mentioned in the video, and that video was about 3 years old now, so I said we're one of the nation's 7 services. Well, it's now one of 8. So you have your 6 armed services, which includes the Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, Space Force, Coast Guard. So those are your 6 armed services. And then you have 2 uniformed services, the U.S. Public Health Service and the NOAA Commissioned Corps. So that totals your 8 there. Like all the other services, we rotate assignments every 2 or 3 years on average. We have operational assignments, whether that be in the fleet driving ships or operating aircraft. And then we have fixed shore assignments where you could be doing a whole bevy of different jobs, whether it be working at a sanctuary like I was doing a staff job, more management. There's a whole wide range of positions there. But ultimately, if I were to describe, NOAA's Commissioned Corps in one sentence, is that we're, we support NOAA's missions with technical expertise, operational experience, and leadership. We're trained to help scientists get to where they need to be to collect the data they need to get the job done, to get their mission done. And at the bottom, you can see some photos there. And there's also a couple links to websites if you'd like some more information, and our Facebook page as well. So I briefly mentioned we have a maritime sector with ships and also an aviation side. So I'll talk about both briefly here. So we've got 15 specialized ships throughout our fleet. They're stationed from, or home port, I should say, from Hawaii all the way to Rhode Island. So in pretty much every part of our country. And they all have their own kind of unique culture and missions that they kind of support through for NOAA. We have a few fisheries research vessels, we call them, that study fish stocks and do marine mammal assessments. So we'll actually go out and set commercial fish limits before the season start. We'll do marine mammal research, you name it. We do marine ecosystem studies, so we might be doing that with remotely operated vehicles, with actual physical divers, just kind of depends. Ocean exploration, so we have at least one ship that's dedicated to ocean exploration and very exciting. We do mapping and charting, so hydrographic surveys, so mapping the ocean floor, looking for debris and shipwrecks, aids or hazards to navigation, anything that could restrict our waterways. And of course, we do coral reef preservation and protection as well. You kind of saw a little bit of that on that video we showed, but we are focused on that heavily as well. It looks like we've got some photos I'll just talk about briefly. You can see, I believe, what is a tiger shark there getting hauled up in a basket, and you can see some of the crew and scientists measuring it. Down in the lower left corner, you can see a hydrographic survey happening. It looks like that seems to be a shipwreck at the bottom that one of our ships is mapping and charting. I mentioned coral reef research. There's one of our divers. Corps officers have a chance to become NOAA certified for scuba diving and support NOAA's missions underwater as well. Ocean exploration. So I talked about, we have one ship that's dedicated to doing that. Think like, you know, Titanic images of finding the Titanic with a remotely operated vehicle. That's exactly what you see going over the side of the ship right there. Something that they'll actually drive from the ship remotely. And then we do fisheries survey too. Back to that first bullet point, you can see one of our crew members bringing in a net and looking at the catch-all at that point. And then secondly is our aviation side of things. So we have 10 aircraft to collect environmental and geographic data. They focus in the following 4 bullet points, but study climate change, both near-term and long-term studies. Assess marine mammal populations. So just like our ships will go out and study marine mammal populations, we'll do the same. We'll deploy our aircraft to kind of get it, to bring scientists up and look for marine mammals from above. Survey the coast. So this is really important, especially after a storm. Most of you probably are aware that we entered hurricane season yesterday. So after a storm makes landfall here in the United States, we'll deploy our planes to kind of go survey from above. And then on the same vein there, improve hurricane and winter storm forecast. So kind of our bread and butter with our aviation sector is the hurricane hunters. So we actually have planes that'll go into the eye of the storm and above it as well to get a full profile with scientists to better understand and predict hurricanes. And there's some photos there I should mention of some of our aircraft that we have in our hangar. And I think that's the last slide for me. Before we transition it over, I'll just open it up for any questions that for the audience that they might have at this point.
Sure, Dustin. We did have a question, and I think you made it obvious on this slide, but NOAA doesn't have any helicopters, right?
No, we do not have any helicopters, unfortunately. That'd be really cool, though.
Well, a couple people in the webinar think so as well. We also, how many, James wants to know about how many pilots are in the NOAA Corps versus folks that work at sea?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know actually the exact numbers. I should know that, especially as a recruiting officer, but I'd venture to guess about 1/4 to 1/3 of our officers, our pilots, are in the aviation sector, with the other 2/3 to 3/4 being on the maritime side of things.
Okay, gotcha. That's how I should talk about it, maritime and aviation.
Yeah, there's different terms for both, but that's how I kind of distinguish them.
Gotcha. So Leslie asks, if you really want to be in the NOAA Corps, but you know you're prone to seasickness, do you think it would still be a good idea to apply to the NOAA Corps?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And you'd be surprised how many officers battle seasickness. Fortunately, there's a lot of medicine out there nowadays that you can take, you know, before you get underway on a trip that'll help ease that. And even if you are susceptible to it, after the first couple of days, from my personal experience as well as others that I've seen, you know, if you kind of go through it and battle it for a couple of days, by day 3 or 4, it's kind of out of your system and you got your sea legs, as we like to call it.
Well, that's like leads right into Quinn's question, which is how long are you at sea at any one time?
Yeah, very good question. So that'll depend on the ship. Some ships go out for as little as 10 days or so at a time, but we have some ships that are able to go out for up to 60 days. So the projects will really vary. I'd say on average, you know, 3-ish weeks, 2 to 3 weeks is probably on average, and coming in for a couple of days before going back out. But yeah, we do have some, and I've been a part of some cruises that are about 45, 50 days long.
Great. And then finally, a question from Lucas. In your NOAA Corps career, on average, how many times would you have to move?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you just do the math, you know, 2 to 3 years, you're moving every single time. And just like the other services, we have a 20-year retirement. So say you do the full 20 years, on average, you're probably moving about 7 to 8 times throughout your career.
So you have to like exploring new places, I guess.
It's part of the job, though. But it's part of the adventure and part of the excitement, in my opinion, too. And there are times where officers, you know, we'll do back-to-back assignments in the same general location as well, so they may not have to move. So there are instances of that.
So Ranja asks a really good question, that if you're interested in research, what advantages are there to joining the NOAA Corps versus becoming a research scientist? And how do you make that choice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's kind of on an individual case-by-case basis. As far as a NOAA Corps officer, I think one of the perks is we're constantly around research, and we get to be involved in a variety of projects across all of NOAA's line offices. So you get to interact with scientists from various backgrounds and expertises. So I think that's a really cool part of the job. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not really trained scientists. We're just kind of operational specialists trained to facilitate the scientists, to help them get their research done. Whereas if you wanted to go into more of the research of the academic field, you might be more focused on whatever science that you are researching, for lack of a better term. So you might be more just kind of specialized into that one topic. And so I think to kind of answer your question, how do you make that decision? I think that's just a personal decision on kind of how you want to tailor your career. If there's something that you're super interested in and you're really gung-ho about learning more about it and discovering new parts of it, then by all means, I think the research avenue might be best for you. But if there's something where you just want to be a part of the research and help get the mission done, you enjoy being on the water or flying planes or something like that, the NOAA Corps might be more for you.
Good, thanks, Dustin. One final question. Some of us at NOAA and other folks are aware that Congress just authorized us to increase our number of NOAA Commissioned Corps officers. So Leslie asks, when will NOAA Corps see the increase in its recruits and workforce that has been authorized?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I purposely didn't bring that up when I asked the audience how many officers, because that's more like 202 versus 101. But yeah, we were authorized to grow our numbers. It's going to be a gradual increase, probably over the course of the next decade, if not longer. The reason being for that is we need to grow our support as well. So we need to hire folks who can support the growth in numbers. And we also need to make sure we have the funding to do so. It's kind of a two-pronged approach. Once we get the funding, we can grow the support, start bringing in more officers. But again, it won't be like a light switch. It'll probably be gradual over the course of the next decade or so, increasing numbers periodically each year.
I love it. All right. Thank you so much. So we'll take the next set of questions, and then I'll hold the next set here for our next break. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'll go ahead and turn it over now to Ensign Cara Geiger. I believe she is going to be leading us in this next group. So Ensign Geiger, take it away.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Ensign Cara Geiger, and I am here with Ensign Carolyn John, who I think is tuned in as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm here over audio. Unfortunately, I don't have a video. I'm sheltering in place before I get underway on the NOAA ship Rainier, and I'm having some technical difficulties. So I'm here over audio.
All right, well, glad you could make it. So I'm Ensign Cara Geiger. I am stationed on the NOAA ship Thomas Jefferson out of Norfolk, Virginia, and I just reported yesterday, so I am new and excited to be a part of the NOAA Corps. I'm happy to be here and thank everyone for tuning in today. And to start off, I just wanted to ask if anyone knows what they want to be when they grow up.
Let's see. Anyone want to share what they're interested in doing when they grow up? Let's see. So Lucas says that he wants to be a scientist. Ranja says he wants to be either a professor or working for NOAA. I think we have sort of a captive audience here. We have folks that are interested in research and education. James says he wants to be a teacher. Theodore says he wants to have an animal farm or be a pilot. And Liam says he'd like to be a farmer or a scientist.
Awesome. Those are all great things. And when I grew up, I wanted to be the weather girl on TV. So I love the weather, and that's what I wanted to do. And I went to college and studied meteorology to study the weather. And then I also studied oceanography for the oceans. And in college, I learned that I wanted to do more hands-on work, kind of like research, like some of you guys want to do. and I wanted to work on the water, and that's how I got to join the United States Coast Guard. That's my background before joining NOAA. I served for 2 years at Station Hatteras Inlet in Hatteras, North Carolina, and I worked on the small boats there in the deck department. And it was at my first unit that I learned about the NOAA Corps from a shipmate actually, and decided to apply and was lucky to get into BOTC 137. And so that's how I kind of got here. And I'll turn it over to Ensign John so she can say how she joined.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here too. I just reported to my ship just a few days ago out here in Seattle at the NOAA ship Rainier. And before the NOAA Corps, I studied environmental science and chemistry for my undergraduate. And afterwards, I worked on a research project with NOAA and NASA data. And that picture on the left is a final research that I did. And I worked with NOAA scientists and I worked with NOAA data, and it was really interesting and great. We looked at snowmelt in Alaska and I loved it, but I didn't love being in an office full time. And it was here that I found out about the NOAA Corps, and I realized that that would combine my love for adventure and the great outdoors and also allow me to be hands-on with the science and the operations. So I became really interested and I applied, and I also got into BOTC 137 and I trained with Ensign Geiger over the past 4 months. And here we are, we finally completed and we're both at our new assignments.
Yeah, so training in Basic Officer Training Class 137 was a very unique experience, but a fun challenge. And we got to do a lot of different things. We got experience on small boats. We got to sail on the Coast Guard Cutter Eagle for 2 weeks and go to Charleston, South Carolina. We got to do firefighting. We learned how to plot nautical charts. We basically got to experience a lot of things individually, but also together as a team, and learn how to work as a team, because when you go on the NOAA aircraft or on a NOAA ship, you're working with other people and you're working in a team. So it's important to learn how to work with others and how to work under stressful situations and limited time. And that's what they taught us in BOTC. So it was definitely very fun and challenging at the same time.
Yeah, looking back at our training, some of my favorite parts were, like Ensign Geiger said, sailing on the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Eagle, where we learned really important navigational skills and charting. We also got to learn how to do celestial navigation with a sextant. So that is what I'm holding in the bottom right corner over there. And throughout training, we also got to learn basic survival skills at sea, where we deployed life rafts and donned immersion suits and learned really valuable skills.
Yeah, so I think there's maybe one more slide. Okay, so billet night. Billet night is when we found out where we were going for our next assignments, and that's where I found out that I was stationed on NOAA ship Thomas Jefferson out of Norfolk, Virginia, which was a very exciting night for everybody to find out where they were going. And graduation as well, just seeing all the hard work that you put into over the past, 4 to 5 months that we were training, and see it all come to fruition was great experience.
Yeah, billet night was really exciting to see where everyone was going to go. I got placed on the NOAA ship Rainier, which was my top choice. It's a hydrographic research vessel. So we chart the bottom of the ocean, and it's something that I'm really interested in learning. And I hope that I have for my new assignment. And an exciting thing coming up is that we are actually headed up to Alaska next week to start our first survey in Glacier Bay, which is supposed to be really beautiful. I've never been to Alaska before, so I'm really excited to get underway.
Yes, me as well. And Thomas Jefferson was my first pick as well. And we are also a hydrographic research vessel, and we will be doing work in the Chesapeake Bay, Virginia, coming up here in a couple of weeks. So I'm very excited to get underway for the first time.
let's see, I think this is where I'm the moderator going to jump in, or do we have one more? Let me see. I think this might be it. So Caroline and Cara, we have a couple of questions for you. So you mentioned that you have a choice. You got to make indicate a preference for where you wanted to be assigned. How does that work?
Yeah, so when we were in our training, they had us write out a memo, which is basically a document where we put what we wanted, and you could put location, like what location you want to be in, if you want to be in the East Coast or the West Coast, if you want to be on a fisheries vessel or hydrographic research vessel. You could actually choose what ship you want. So there was a lot of different options for us, and we were able to list what we wanted based off of those options. And that's kind of how we got to our picks, because I knew I wanted something on the East Coast. I knew I wanted to do a hydro vessel, and that's how I got to Thomas Jefferson.
Great. Caroline, do you have anything to add?
No, not much to add. Ensign Geiger and I are very lucky. We both got our top choices. It is dependent on the needs of the service. So some of our friends may have not gotten their first choice, but in the end, every assignment is a great assignment, and everyone is really happy where they are. And there's often new experiences that you might not even know that you want. So we're really lucky, and we're both really excited to start.
Oh, great. Well, this is so I think this next question is interesting, because I think that's Admiral Hahn there in the bottom right, right?
Yes.
Yeah, shaking hands. So someone's asking me about how has it been to be a woman in the NOAA Corps? Are there a lot of women in the NOAA Corps?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because when I was at my station in the Coast Guard, I was the only female there out of a team of 40 at my station. So coming into NOAA, and there's a lot of females on my ship. My commanding officer, my executive officer, the operations officer is all female. And so just being a part of a service that has a lot of women is truly great. And I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's really empowering, especially having Admiral Hahn as the director of the NOAA Corps and seeing all that she's accomplished. In our basic officer training class, there was 50% women and 50% men. So I would say that goes across. I don't know the exact number, but it seems that's it's probably 50-50 men and women. And I've always felt really supported as a woman in the NOAA Corps.
That's great. Well, it's exciting. So you guys are really just starting your first assignment. So how long were you in officer training?
We had to do a quarantine beforehand. So we reported, I believe it was like New Year's Eve, and we didn't graduate until May 3rd. And then we also completed another like 16 days of training after that, just to wrap up everything. So it was definitely over 5 months.
Gotcha. And I have one more question, because I think our audience is pretty sharp, but I think they know that you can't train to be a pilot in 5 months. So when you say that you go to training, what's the difference between what you're receiving in officer training versus, the skills you need to do your first assignment, for example?
Yeah, I could take that. So in training, we learn a lot of professional mariner skills. So they say that all NOAA Corps officers are mariners. So even if you become a pilot, it is really important to learn our roots, which is in the maritime community. So in training, we focus on maritime skills and also military bearing and military traditions. We train alongside the Coast Guard, so we are fully immersed in military training as well as survival and leadership skills. And afterwards, if you are selected to go to flight school is a separate 2-year training down in Florida that you would go to. And for example, Ensign Geiger and I are both on hydrographic research vessels, so that's another skill we don't get necessarily in our basic officer training, but we will get that hands-on on the ship, and later we will actually attend a month-long hydro school. So it's constant training throughout your career.
Gotcha. So a long time ago, when we first started this series last year, we had Commander Colin Little on, and he told us that one of the best things about working on a NOAA ship is that you get to pick what kind of ice cream you want on board. One of our viewers remembered that and wants to know if you guys were asked what flavor ice cream you needed to have on your ship.
I was not yet, but it's a definitely interesting question.
I also was not asked, but I did receive an ice cream sandwich on my very first day, and that made me really happy.
Great. All right, well, we'll move on to Doug. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ensign Christine Sealing with the Aircraft Operations Center in Lakeland, Florida. I am a volcanologist by background and a remote sensor. I also had my private pilot's license, and I'm a tall ship sailor. I applied to NOAA Corps because I discovered that it encompassed basically all of my passions. It encompasses science and maritime operations and aviation. And honestly, I was dissatisfied with my academic career before. I felt that I could do more, be more of service. Recently completed my initial flight training. They put you through flight training in Vero Beach, and I completed my multi-engine commercial license. So very shortly, I will be heading to Canada to train on twin otters, and I will be flying this baby very soon. I basically joined NOAA for the adventure, for using aviation and my science background for the good of the environment and for our country. And I'm very excited to be flying the Twin Otter here shortly, and I look forward to all the adventures that NOAA.
I forgot about Christine. And then is that the only one we're going to show, Doug?
I believe we may have one more video, but that was Ensign Christine Sealing.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name's Nina. I joined the NOAA Corps so that I could travel the world and be a part of some really interesting science that will impact global environmental policy changes.
Short and sweet. Okay, back to you, Doug.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me, everybody. My name is Lieutenant Doug Polishin. I'm the chief of the NOAA Corps recruiting branch. So Lieutenant Picard and I get the pleasure of meeting and greeting and answering questions to any interested individuals for the NOAA Corps. So looking forward to any questions you may have. Feel free to type those in the chat. But when I was thinking about this presentation, I got to thinking about myself as a kid. And how did a kid from Western Massachusetts who lived on a small farm get into the NOAA Corps, primarily sailing? So as I thought about it, I didn't have too much on the water experience growing up, and that's not something that's absolutely required. It does help, but if you don't have it, it's not something you can't overcome, and I'm living proof of that. So things that I started to think about when, how did I get here? How did I get into the NOAA Corps? A few things I'd like to share is, you're going to have a lot of opportunities in life, whether it's, going for a hike or going for a swim or visiting a new area or camping or what have you. Don't turn down an opportunity. Every opportunity kind of makes up your background and makes up who you are. And that's what we're looking for in the NOAA Corps is individuals with a lot of experience who are willing to go do things. The next thing I had on my list is, go out, do things, work hard, talk to people, hear stories. I think you all heard Ensign Geiger describe how she found out about the NOAA Corps. She was in the Coast Guard, enlisted in the Coast Guard, and one of her coworkers had told her about the NOAA Corps. So just by going out and talking to people, you get a vast range of experiences that really help shape your personality too. And the last thing that I had, I could have had a very long list, but I tried to summarize it, is just have a great attitude, have a great can-do attitude. I think Lieutenant Picard and I would both agree we'd much rather work with somebody on their application who has a positive can-do attitude. I mean, attitude is the wind in your sails. So make sure you have a good attitude when you're going for whatever you're going for. Hopefully it'll be the NOAA Corps. My favorite, I just put in here, my favorite NOAA experience, it goes back to probably that picture there. When I was in the 3rd grade, I had a teacher read us a story about the Iditarod dog sled race in Alaska. And I just remember there being a lot of snow and being a kid and thinking about it, and they got onto the Northern Lights. I had never heard of the Northern Lights or the Aurora Borealis, but sounded magnificent. I can still think about it to this day. And that was always something that I really wanted to see. And on my last sea tour on the NOAA ship Belle M. Shimada, we were working just south of Alaska, and it got to the point in the cruise we're all pretty tired and looking forward to hitting the pier for a little R&R, but we had a couple days left, and I got up at the bridge around 3:30 in the morning, took over my watch, was having a sip of my coffee, and decided to open up our port bridge wing door to get a little fresh air. And when I walked out onto the bridge wing, I happened to glance up into the sky, and I'll never forget it. That's when the sky looked like a green river, and as it condensed, I realized what I was seeing was the Northern Lights. So that thing I thought about from 3rd grade on, I finally did get to see it. So that was a very cool experience for me, and I'll never forget it. And then I just had a question, or a question for the group here is, kind of a trivia. Where have I sailed? And those are the possible answers. So feel free to put the answer, or to shout out an answer in the chat, and I'll let you know if you're right.
Okay, kids, so Doug wants to know, do you think he's been to the Gulf of Mexico, the entire East Coast, the Caribbean, the entire West Coast, or Alaska? And he already told us he went to Alaska, so I think that one's a gimme. I don't think you fooled any of these guys, Doug. Everyone is saying they think all of the above.
Darn, I so hoping to trick you all. No, that's absolutely correct. I've sailed all of those places, and I've been in the NOAA Corps just about 9.5 years, going on 10 years. So in a decade, we've covered some miles at sea, and we've seen some truly amazing stuff. So part of my job is recruiting. We help clarify the career paths and talk to incoming officers. So there's a lot that goes into it, selecting follow-on assignments. So after you finish your initial sea tour, if you don't go direct to aviation, you have quite a few billets, as we call them, that you can go to. On those assignments, you're kind of away from the sea duty per se. I mean, there are small boat assignments. I had a picture on my last slide of the Gloria Michelle. That was my first land assignment. I was the captain of the Gloria Michelle in Woods Hole at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. Fantastic assignment, loved it. But there's a lot of different assignments. We've got assignments in Key West, Florida. We've got assignments in Hawaii. We've got assignments on the Great Lakes, Alabama, Gulf Coast, Georgia, Maryland, Virginia, Alaska, you name it, we probably have a billet there or somewhere near there. One of the cool things about the NOAA Corps is no two officers have the same career path. So out of 321 of us right now, eventually growing to 500, not one person will have the same career path as another person. So that's the coolest part about the whole career, is there's so many different experiences. And when you do meet up with your BOTC classmates, you do hear a lot of very interesting stories and experiences that they're having, and you get to share yours, and it's just a fantastic place to work. The sea and shore rotation typically works 2 to 3 years at sea and then 3 years on shore, and that's just based on the needs of the service, but that's typically how our rotations go. But each time you go back to sea, you move up a level. So I started on the NOAA ship Pisces as an ensign, navigation officer. Then I went to the Gloria Michelle and worked out of Woods Hole for 3 years. After there, I went to the NOAA ship Belle M. Shimada as the operations officer. And after I finished my time here with the recruiting department, I'll be looking to go out to sea as an executive officer on one of NOAA ships. Career development is amazing. I mean, like I said, I've been in the NOAA Corps for 9.5 years, and I can't think of anywhere else that I would want to work or work with people that are as good as the people who make up NOAA as a whole. I mean, the conversations, the learning, there's never a dull moment, and it's really is amazing. And like I said, there's a wide variety of opportunities. So if you don't want to scuba dive, there's a lot of other stuff you can do. You know, we'll roll into some of the slides here. Some of my classmates are pilots, so they're flying in, around, and above hurricanes, doing snow surveys in Alaska and everywhere else in the country, marine mammal assessments. We're really starting to branch off into unmanned systems such as drones, and at the bottom left there is the Thomas Jefferson working with an unmanned system. So that's really the future. So it's really an interesting time for NOAA. Small boat assignments galore. Just fantastic possibilities in the NOAA Corps. These are some of our pilots, or actually, I should back up a little bit there. We're all NOAA Corps officers first. Whether you're a mariner or an aviator, you're a NOAA Corps officer. So some people go down the aviation track, such as about 5 of my classmates, and some stay on the seaside, such as myself. And everywhere you go, whether you're running a small boat or flying an aircraft or on a NOAA ship, everybody's professional. It's just, I can't express how great of a place it is to work. Just some more pictures here of just the different things you can do. The top right there is, I believe, the Doppler in a hurricane. You know, ROV operations on the top left there. Some pilots, air conferences, Women in Aviation conferences is one we do attend. That bottom left there was actually taken on the Bellum Shimada. They were recovering a CTD, which is an instrument that, you know, depending on how deep the scientists want to sample, we can lower it down to 3,000 to 5,000 meters, collect water samples, and bring it back up. But yeah, you're never gonna stop learning, and you're never gonna stop running into amazing situations and stories along the way.
That is so great. Is this I think this is our last photo slide. I think there were 3. So I do have a couple of questions for you, Doug. Before that, you showed some divers. So you mentioned maritime versus aviators. So can you be trained to be a diver in the NOAA Corps, or do you come in as a diver?
No, you can be trained. That's so what we technically call it is the collateral duty that you can continue on for your whole career. So I went through dive school in 2013 in Key West, Florida, and I was a trained working diver. I currently don't dive due to my billet, but I did do a lot of technical dives. I dove anywhere from 31 degrees Fahrenheit in Cape Cod, Massachusetts in February to 78 degrees in the Florida Keys, maybe a little hotter. But yeah, depending on what you want to do, it's up to you. So if like I said early on, like never turn down an opportunity. My executive officer came to me when I was an ensign and said, hey, Ensign Polishin, would you like to go to dive school and help us support the ship as needed and get under the ship and help clean the hull and remove gear as needed? And I said, absolutely, yes, we'll do. So NOAA trained me and sent me, and I went in as a relatively inexperienced diver and left as a master diver.
Wow, that is so cool. So do you know, because the NOAA Corps is so small, as you mentioned, you're a NOAA Corps officer first. Lucas wants to know if you guys all know each other really well, because you're rotating around all the time. It must feel like a big family.
It really does. And I think, I would say I know the majority of the NOAA Corps, or have at least heard your name, or have talked to you on the phone. And that is the cool part about the NOAA Corps. We are such a small organization. You could fit us all on a medium-sized Coast Guard ship. We've all been there, had similar experiences, and we are a tight-knit family. And if somebody calls me and I don't know them, but they're a NOAA Corps officer, people are willing to bend over backwards and share experiences and help you out. So it is really a tight-knit family. And to be honest, there's a lot of great things about the NOAA Corps and NOAA in general. And one of the best, if not the best, is the people.
I can see that. I think so as well. So we've had some NOAA Corps officers on NOAA Live. Do you know any of the guys who are and gals who have done our program in the past?
I absolutely do. If we could forward to that, there we go. Now, I've never met Commander Mansour, but I've heard great things. I know he flew the G4, I believe, so I had a lot of flight time. Commander Colin Little, very great officer. I've had extensive conversations with him. He's just a really intelligent person. And we actually both went to the same undergrad, the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And then
Colin's the one who told us about the ice cream.
Yes, I can second that. I don't really have a sweet tooth, but there's an ample supply of ice cream if that's what you guys are looking for. But yeah, on the bottom picture there, we've got our divers and diver training. 2 years ago, I ended up in Seattle, and I stopped by the NOAA Diving Center. And something that really struck me is the head of the diving program recognized me. He taught me for 3 weeks, but hadn't seen me for just about 8 years, and he remembered me by first name. So it is a tight, small-knit organization, and people do care about each other.
And I think there's another slide. There you go. That's right.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just additional webinars, Lieutenant JG Michelle Lovano. She's definitely an up-and-coming hydrographic officer. She's helped recruiting a lot lately, and she's very knowledgeable on the hydrographic sciences. Let's see. I've sailed with Lieutenant Lauren Jarlinski, and I've also deployed buoys myself. So, all this stuff and all your experience really starts to connect, and you really start to, as you move up in the organization, begin to realize how connected everything is.
Wow, that is so cool. Yeah, go ahead and introduce Sarah so folks know about that.
Absolutely. Commander Duncan is one of my favorite officers. She was the executive officer of Marine Center Pacific when I was the operations officer on the Belle M. Shimada. So we did get to interact quite a bit. And I understand she just had a very successful command tour on the Oscar Dyson. Really great officer. And I will be tuning in for that webinar for sure.
Yeah, make sure that you guys, so that's next Tuesday. And then our final webinar in the series is going to be on Wednesday, talking about orcas. So I'll just mention that now while I can. So we have just a couple of minutes for a few final questions. I'm going to bring all you guys back just so everyone can see you, except for Caroline that we couldn't get on camera. There you go. And thank you guys so much. So is there any last minute questions for our officers? Cara, I do want to pass along a question from Theodore. He wants to know if you ever got to ride in a helicopter when you were with the Coast Guard.
I didn't get to ride in a helicopter, but I did helicopter operations on my small boats. So we would, go out on the small boats and we would meet a helicopter and practice lifting the basket and things like that. But I've never actually been in a helicopter.
Great.
Nicole, I would like to take a chance. Maybe this would help Theodore's question is, we did have helicopters in the NOAA Corps at one point. Our last operational flight was just after Hurricane Katrina on the Gulf Coast. That's when we started to phase helicopters out. And like I said, we're going to unmanned systems that are a little cheaper to operate and kind of give us the same data quality. But we did at one point fly helicopters in the NOAA Corps.
Well, thank goodness. Theodore, you can go to bed happy tonight. So let's see. And then I think I'll ask this of you, Doug. I think let's see, are you the most senior? Dustin, how long have you been in? Okay, so I got the nod from Dustin. So you're the old man in the room here. So since it is Pride Month, would you describe the NOAA Corps as diverse, equitable, inclusive? Donna wants to know.
I absolutely would. I mean, I don't think I've ever been a part of a team that is more inclusive and willing to engage with everybody in an open, respectful platform. So I would absolutely agree with that.
Well, it has been such a privilege talking to all of you. And Cara and Caroline, good luck on your first assignments. And Doug and Dustin, I think you're going to have a lot of new recruits from your webinar today. Thanks for joining us. And I hope that you guys will all come back next week for our last week of NOAA Live for this school year. Go ahead and log into that Alaska one if you can with Lisa, or watch the recording. And then Wednesday, Grace is going to wrap us up with the orcas. So it should be great. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.